Welcome to Ranting and Raving. This will be another Final Fantasy video, as you probably could tell from the title. And today's one I wanted to make for a bunch of reasons, but one of them being one of the many, many reasons Final Fantasy is pretty much my favorite gaming franchise is the characters. And something that's, thankfully becoming more and more common, but certainly hasn't always been the case, are strong quality female characters. And when I say quality, I don't mean waifus. You want a waifu video? Go search for Genshin. Um, but I mean more of characters with an arc of a story, who have meaningful impacts on the plot, who have actual character development and reasonable personalities beyond plot MacGuffin or damsel in distress. Those have their place in storytelling, but they're not particularly engaging or interesting. And because of that, there's a few characters from Final Fantasy that you might expect to be on this list that won't be. But with that said, this is my list of the 5 female characters in the Final Fantasy franchise who I think are the best. And just to get it started from the beginning, this is obviously very subjective. It's personal preference, personal opinion. It's also, again, to reiterate, not a waifu list. It's not which one did the artist draw the most towards my tastes and fancy. And it's also not which one's personality is the most to my tastes and fancy. Although, obviously, there's an element of that because I'm saying which ones I think are the best. It's which ones do I think have the most meaningful, interesting, relevant impact on the stories while not just being tropes. So, with that said, let's get started with one of the strongest female characters in Final Fantasy history, Final Fantasy XIII's Fang. So outside of being a complete badass, which she is, and again, that will be a common theme for a lot of these characters. These are all characters who've, in one way or another, saved the world. So, obviously, badassery will be a common theme. But beyond that, let's take a look for a second at who Fang is. So, Fang remembers Grand Pulse. Fang remembers everything. Fang is protecting and taking care of Vanille, who doesn't. Fang has literally seen her world destroyed. Fang is protecting her only friend. She is the only character in the party who Lightning can really rely on. She's the only other one with leadership qualities, with poise, with the moral compass, of course, but the ability to take on a burden and drive things. And it's a huge, huge aspect of them eventually, obviously, having success, doing what they do when they get back. I forget the name of the big orb in the sky. She's less of a character for 13.2 and 13.3, but in the main Final Fantasy 13 game, Fang is a very, very well written character. She's a very strong character without, again, being overly tropey. She's not made to be super tsundere to fan service, and she's also not made to be some bitchy alpha chick who is a jerk to everyone because I'm a bad bitch. I gotta be a bad bitch, which is just obnoxious on its own. Captain Marvel. She's a real character that responds to things in real ways, who has real trauma, who deals with that real trauma by partially hiding from it, but also burying it and focusing on her tasks and her goals and the one thing that she has, which is protecting her friend. And then over time, friends, plural. That's actually realistic. And it's a role that traditionally, the stoic veteran with a tragic past who's a badass but also carrying a crap ton of emotional baggage, it's usually a role that is reserved for male characters. And 13 didn't do that. They gave us a realistic, powerful, driven, interesting, engaging female character. Fang is one of the 5 on my list for, call it the most interesting, the most engaging, the most well written, the most impactful. Pick your superlative, whatever strikes your fancy. But it's basically my best girl list, but I'm not using that term because, again, the connotation will be a lot of horny bonks for the internet, when 14 people watch this. But with that said, let's go ahead and go into the next person on the list. I also should mention this. This list is not in order. So there's no ranking. There's 5 of them and 1 honorable mention, and that's it. They're not in order. But Final Fantasy XIV's Y'shtola, you cannot do a list of the most badass, impactful, powerful, interesting, important, blah 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 women in the Final Fantasy franchise without mentioning Y'shtola. At least up to this point, when I've done videos, I have excluded 11 and 14 simply because they're MMOs, and a lot of the stuff I do is comparisons or rankings, and that's not apples and oranges, it's oranges and fucking watermelons. And each expansion's a damn seed. Like it's completely different scope, so it's just not fair to compare them. But when you're talking about characters, it doesn't really matter if the character is there for one expansion, one part of a story, or, a single standalone game. Good characters are good characters. Bad characters are bad characters. Selfie. Um, He's not really a bad character, she's just annoying. But whatever. Her and Zell both. Anyway, I digress. Y'shtola is, now obviously, MMOs. If you do know anything about MMOs, or you're familiar with them, um, they very much tend to follow the silent protagonist route. Um, 14 doesn't do that entirely, and there is a canonical, sprite for the main character, the Warrior of Light, later becomes the Warrior of Darkness, yada yada. Um, but a lot of the story and dialogue, the vast majority of it is driven by the additional characters that you interact with. Y'shtola is, in a lot of ways, your first mentor. She's one of the only characters that was there in 1.0. For those who don't know, Final Fantasy XIV originally released as a 1.0 version. And it had some cool ideas, and it was terrible. And some people liked it, most people hated it, and it did horrible, to the point where they basically made the game free, rebuilt that sumbitch from the ground up, and then re-released it for 2.0 as a Realm Reborn, which then went on to become, arguably, and in my opinion, the greatest Japanese MMO, and really just best MMO ever. Like, I think Final Fantasy XIV at this point is a better game than WoW. It doesn't have the longevity that WoW has yet, but I think it's better. I think it's a better game. I think it tells a better story. I think it's better. Personal opinion. Y'shtola is a key figure. Now, she's not the only one. You have Minfilia, you have Thancred, you have, lots and lots of characters. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But she's one of the only characters that's there from the very, very beginning, all the way through the end, goes through a ton. Personally, I love the way that she's written. She's a driver of a character. And when I say a driver, I mean she drives the plot forward. She drives the main character to do things. She's got a lot of big sister energy. She's, sassy cat mom. Whatever nickname the internet gives her. Please, God, do not Google her without safe search on, folks. Really, don't do that. You'll regret it. Well, then maybe you won't. Who knows? But really, really strong character. Not in any way a damsel character. Like, yes, the party does things to save her, but Y'shtola is the quintessential, there's a job that needs to be done, and I'm going to make sure it gets done, and if I have to die to get it done, so be it. But that's what I said I was going to do, and I'm going to do it. Again, not a role traditionally cast for female characters. It's not like it's never happened, but it's very rare. Ishtola's put in that position, and not, and again, these are, video games and Japanese animation, so this caveat does kind of need to be brought up, not overly sexualized. The fact that she's a cat girl, not really relevant at all. It's just a race within the world. She's a badass, she's brilliant, she's smart, she has a ton of willpower, and she's driven. And continues to help drive the plot forward. Like any game, like any fantasy story, there are MacGuffins. One of Final Fantasy XIV's MacGuffins is pretty much just Ishtola being a badass. Like, yeah, I'm gonna do the thing. Whatever the thing is, I'm just gonna get it done. I'm gonna do the impossible, then I'm gonna come back because badasses don't die. So, has to be on my list. If you've played 14, I'm not saying she's the best character. Obviously, everyone has their favorites, but she makes my list, for a ton of reasons, and she's just an all-around badass. The next one on the list, obviously, I mentioned earlier, the very first main character of any Final Fantasy game who is female. Now, that comes with kind of a caveat, but the only main character where the story is told from their perspective of any Final Fantasy game that is female is Lightning. And Lightning is a phenomenal character. She's a soldier, and she's written as a soldier. She's an operative. She's a special ops operative who finds out that her sister's in a ton of danger and who goes through literally everything to try to save her. Literally. Go Wikipedia the plot of those three games. They're not my favorite games, but the 13 franchise drinks its own Kool-Aid heavily as far as the deep dives into the lore. Lightning is a badass. And not to overuse the term, but the promotional material that was used for Final Fantasy 13 was basically Lightning being a badass with one of the cooler weapons in Final Fantasy history, which is her version of the Gunblade, in a train fight. Like, just go watch that trailer, and yeah, she's a operative, she's a super soldier, and she comes across that way. She's focused, she's committed, she is driven for her family, so she's not presented in the way where Squall is, for example, in 8 through most of the game, where he's also an operative, he's a super soldier, he's top of his class, he's surrounded by idiots, and he's just completely annoyed by them, and so thus edgy. And she doesn't have amnesia like Cloud. Like, she is a soldier, she's focused, she's competent, she's intelligent, she's driven, she's tactical, she's occasionally annoyed by the people around her, but she's trained to protect, and she does it. She's nurturing when she needs to be, but she could have just stabbed Hope one time. She'd be unequivocally the greatest character in the history of Final Fantasy if she'd have just gone, no, but we don't really need a Hope. Shink, head off, dead. That would have been the best moment in the history of the Final Fantasy franchise. But Lightning, unlike me, isn't a terrible person, and she feels bad for the annoying little twat. So, the maternal instincts kick in, the big sister instincts kick in. Phrase it whichever way you want. Both are probably somewhat accurate. But again, written in a realistic manner. Nothing about Lightning's character is out of the realm of possibility. Obviously the fantasy elements aside, but the actual character, the psychology, the way she's written, the way the plot goes on, she's arguably the single strongest character in the history of the franchise. And as the years have gone on, they've done a great job of bringing up like a ton of good quality female characters. But Lightning is and should be an icon, both because she was the first female lead. Yes, representation matters. But beyond that, she's not a token character. She's not a caricature. She's a well-written character who fits the way that she's written in a realistic manner, and, again, for lack of a better term, badass. Like, I slay gods, badass. So, obviously, Lightning has to be on the list. The other character, technically, Lightning is not the first female main character of a Final Fantasy game. Make no mistake about this. The main character of Final Fantasy X is Yuna. Period. Yuna is the main character of that story. The story is told from Tidus's perspective. They literally even show you this by the whole "this is my story" thing, and then basically the beginning and the end, they show like Tidus made a sphere recording himself. Like the whole game is the recording of his experience with the party, basically. She's the main character. She's the whole driving force behind everything. The story is told from a party member, a very important party member. A party member who acts as a catalyst who helps for the evolution that Yuna's character goes through. Now let's talk a little bit about Yuna's character, because in my opinion, Yuna's character goes through more character development than any other main character in Final Fantasy history. You could argue Cecil. You could argue. Nah, you can't really argue Lightning. Nah, like Cecil maybe. Like as far as transformative and long-term storytelling and an arc of a story, maybe you could argue. But his is really tropey. I love it for it's one of my absolute favorite games, but it's really tropey. Here's the thing with Yuna. So her father, who she barely knew, died, sacrificed himself to save the world from sin. And in case you haven't played 10, Sin is this big evil monster that comes back every random allotment of years to basically commit wanton destruction around the world until someone eventually is able to do the final summoning and defeat him for a short period of time. And during the times where Sin is basically on a respawn timer, they call it the calm, and the grand summoners are the ones who bring about the calm, and they're celebrated. And Yuna's father did it. And Yuna is the daughter of Lord Braska, the High Summoner. She has a naturally caring personality, but is also brought up and raised basically by a surrogate family because her family's gone. Which in a world called Spira is the spiral of death. Like that's the whole plot of the game. It's actually a very, very dark adult game. Really good writing. But that 15, 16-year-old girl decides it's her duty to take up her father's mantle and try to make people happy and safe. So, knowing that the final summoning means death. Now, she doesn't know why it means death. We'll get to that in a second. But knowing the final summoning means death, this 16-year-old girl decides that she's willing to sacrifice herself. She's not peer pressured into it. In fact, they try to convince her not to do it. Many of her friends and family do, and she goes, no, I'm doing it. Because 16-year-olds always listen. Then, through meeting the other main character, the character who the story is told from the perspective of, Tidus, who's not from that world, and thus doesn't have the perspective of someone from Spira, and the cycle of death, and all the weight and tragedy that comes with that, she not only develops closer and closer relationships with her friends, but eventually stops being the dutiful daughter of Yevon, their religion, which of course, it's a JRPG. Oh, there's a pope? That's the bad guy. Done. And historically accurate, so, kudos. So, long story short, there's Yevon. They have to go to the different temples. They pray at each one. She gets a series of summons. She gets stronger throughout time until she's strong enough, completes her pilgrimage, gets the final summoning, which you find out the final summon is created by killing one of her guardians, someone she has an incredibly close relationship with, because the stronger the bond between them, the more powerful the summon. And then, when she kills Sin, this little fucking parasite, who's actually you, Yevon, the head of Yevon, the church that's trying to defeat Sin, he's actually the bad guy. And this parasitic little asshole possesses the summons, and then that summon incubates for a while, and then it becomes the new Sin. And the carapace of Sin is actually a shell that Yu Yevon constructs around himself to protect the core that is the little parasitic little bastard. And this is all done by this undead bitch, Yunalesca, who was the first one to do the final summoning to defeat the first Sin. She sacrificed her husband. Great lady. Well, because of the character development and the relationships and the discovery of not only her self identity but her self worth. Because at the beginning of the story, Yuna clearly only sees her value as her ability to bring joy to others by bringing about the calm. And she has no self worth outside of that. And through the interactions with her friends throughout the course of the story, she discovers her self worth and discovers an identity and cares about living. And you can only fight to live if you want to live. So they kill Unalesca, which means they kill the only way to do the final summoning. Oh my god, you've ended the world! Nope. We're going to find a way. So they do find a way. And they eventually kill Sin. Now, it has a bit of a sad ending because that character, who is, by the end of the game, her boyfriend, Titus, that the story is told from, well, turns out that he's basically a manifestation of a dream. You play the game. It'd take me too long to explain it. So if they kill Sin, he dies. He doesn't tell her that. So here's the thing. At the beginning of the game, Yuna, who doesn't really have any self-worth, is willing to sacrifice herself because it's her duty to make others happy. And because she wants to live and wants to be with her friends and wants to protect her friends and wants to end the cycle of death, chooses to live, fights for life, and gets it. And her boyfriend, who also wants to live, but wants her to live more, actually ends up sacrificing himself to give her the life that he wants her to have. It's a great story. It's a hell of a story arc. And again, she's 16 and goes through some shit. But the maturity of the character and the discovery of the identity as she goes through, one of the absolute best characters in Final Fantasy history. Am I biased because 10's my favorite game? Sure. Is that something you can really refute? Not really. You can tell me you don't like Yuna. You can't tell me she's not an extremely well-written character. Oh, here's our honorable mention. Lady Barrett. Long may she reign. I'm just having a little bit of fun with this for those who played Final Fantasy VII, and god damn, they better put this in the next episode of the remake. Barrett and Cloud, through a series of events, can actually go on a date in Final Fantasy VII and ride the Ferris wheel together. You can ride the Ferris wheel with the sentient piece of tropey cardboard named Aerith, who eventually gets actual character development in Crisis Core, and then we got that version of Aerith in the new Final Fantasy VII Remake, and she's actually a good character, but the original game still counts, so she ain't on this list, because cardboard cunt. Really. Think about that character. Knew Cloud was a fake. Knew he had issues. Manipulated him to get what she wanted, and then basically became a guilt bomb for him to make him do what she wanted him to do. Not a great character. Her relationship with Zack, though, much better written, much better established. Don't hate her. But anyway, Lady Barrett is on the list because I wanted to have a little bit of fun. And the final member on this list, and again, final does not mean best. It just means that's the last slide I made, is Tifa. So, let's have a short conversation about Tifa. Tifa's not on this list because the internet loves the 2D pixelated bazongas that the animators decided to put on her chest. Because for some reason, someone who was making that game saw Lara Croft's Tomb Raider and went, I can do you one bigger. This image is from Advent Children, where she was animated in a far more realistic physique. Still buxom. Not, falling over impossible to do martial arts because you're carrying a couple of fucking watermelons on your chest, which is basically the way she was animated originally, which is kind of absurd and also why the internet went ham with her for years and years and years and years and years. This isn't about waifus. Let's talk about Tifa as a character. Tifa is a member of a pseudo rebellion group, trying to stop an evil corporation that is literally not figuratively, literally, draining the planet, die, and killing the planet. Tifa is not only the only responsible member of the party, Barrett might be their heart and their muscle and their passion, but he ain't the brains, and he's definitely not the mature one. She's not only their overseer, Tifa is pretty much the main moral or arbiter of Final Fantasy VII as far as the party and the plot. She is consistently the character that helps keep everyone in line. She is consistently the one that helps point out the right things to do. She's also consistently and through most of the game the only one who gives a fuck about Cloud. And even eventually the other party members do. But she's basically his only friend. She also, as you eventually learn, she knows that Cloud wasn't a soldier first class. She knows that he's pretending to be something he's not. And as his friend, she just supports him because she can also tell, dude's got some issues, something's going on here, but we need him. I'm just going to be there for it. So you have all the nurturing elements, her being, quote unquote, best girl, best friend, figure it, again, choose your terms, I don't care. But you also have the badass elements. Tifa is an incredibly strong character. Like, cutscene strong, gameplay strong, but also, plot strong. You're fighting people with giant swords and fighting weapons that are literally the essence of the will of the planet. And she's punching things in the face and they're dying. Badass. Martial arts, not even a practitioner. She's a freaking savant. Like, oh yeah, we have giant swords. We have giant spears. I have a shuriken that's the size of my body. Nope. I'm just going to punch that. And there's going to be a hole in it. Then I'm going to punch that because this one's dead. So I'm going to go punch yours too. Tifa is, very, very strong character. Like, literally a strong character. Very, very well written character. Nurturing character. Again, outside of the way she was animated, which again is not part of this, and please don't fucking bring it up in the comments. I'll just call you an idiot. But personal favorite wise, Tifa is my favorite female character in Final Fantasy. She barely beats out Lightning. But not only is she a strong female character, but she was one of the first, if not, and in my opinion, is the first character who has a fully fleshed out personality, who is not presented as either a martyr or a bimbo or a trope, and that includes Aerith, or a plot device. She is an actual functioning, fully developed member of the party with her own wants and desires, her own thoughts, who is a major driving force behind the plot. Not just as a supporting character, but again, as an overseer, as a moral arbiter, etc. Awesome, badass character. And one of the great things in the remake is that they've really done a great job of capturing those elements of her character. Especially with the direction it looks like they're going with the plot for that. Whether it's some type of rebirth or transcendence or some element of, Aerith clearly did something when she merged with the life string, blah blah. We'll figure it out as they release it, but it's pretty clear they're doing some things, and the versions that you're playing as are not. It's not totally an actual just we remade the game. These are the later versions of them somehow re-experiencing the events. Still a badass, still a driving character, again, still a moral arbiter, and again, not a role that has always been put in the hands of the female character. I mean, the guys, can we all get along character, that person, oh yeah, all the way through fantasy, all the way through fiction, today, and all the way going back. But she's not that character. It's, we need to do this thing because it's the right thing to do. We have a duty. Let's do it. Let's get together. Let's take care of each other. We all we got. She's Coach Carter, folks, with, watermelons. um, but that's my list. So from me, minus Lady Barrett, that's my top 5. Let's call them favorite. Let's call them what I am calling it, which is the best. Female protagonists in the Final Fantasy franchise. But if you made it all the way through the video, Like, comment, subscribe if you feel like it. But also, definitely comment. Let me know in the comments whether you agree, what you disagree with, and just if you have different characters. Just please God, don't put don't put selfie. I beg of you, don't put selfie. And if you put Ico, I have a ton of questions, and I might be calling the authorities. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and you'll hear more from me later.